Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 141 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
Hello, everybody. We're here to do our usual thing, our father-son duo, here to talk about college football by college football fans for college football fans. For those who usually like to listen to us for our national discussions, this may not be the podcast for you, as this will be fully focused on the Nebraska football team and our recent hire of Matt Rhule as our new head coach and what that means for the future of Nebraska, his potential assistant coaches, though we will be touching on some of the other coaching hires that have been announced in the last week that do affect the national sphere.
There you go. All right.
Yes.
And I am opening a beer for this particular podcast, Alex. I'm choosing to open a Yuengling traditional lager. Again, a great lager beer made by the oldest brewery in America.
Very nice.
So, love it. It's a good traditional beer. You know, since you're coming to Florida to visit us for Christmas, I'll be sure to have some of these for us when we visit at Christmas time.
Ooh, I'll look forward to that. For the record, we are recording this on Monday the 28th. So Matt Rhule had his press conference earlier today. There's still rumors swirling around assistant coaches and stuff, so we don't have a lot of news on official hires and things like that. So we'll be talking with what we do know. But of course, with, usual timing, the real substantive rumors about Matt Rhule really started to swirl like the day after we recorded our podcast last week, after the Wisconsin game. And you were texting me, that this was seeming like a real thing throughout that week. And it got announced, as we predicted, after the Iowa game on Saturday, which was one benefit of us playing on Friday, was that on Saturday, Trev was able to make the big announcement about Matt Rhule, and it got coverage on College Game Day before the Michigan-Ohio State game that had a ton of eyeballs watching it. So it was a great timing to get the news out broadly.
Oh, absolutely. As an overview, reaching commentary about this process that started with going our separate ways from Scott Frost early this season. I've got to say that I just want to go on record, so to speak, that I think Trev Albers has handled this perfectly. I really do. I think the way he was able to go through the process, his ability to articulate what he planned to do and how he planned to do it, and then proceed and actually do it and maintain the secrecy that he was able to maintain is quite remarkable, really. The only cracks, as it turned out, in his information flow were so small and people were unable to get corroborating information. So none of them ever lit fire, even though I think he latched on to Matt Rhule quite a few weeks ago, and it is now apparent, as he described during the press conference. He spoke first, and he went through specifically the process, what he wanted to do, how he did it. He even went into as many specifics as to say, I spoke with 13 different coaches. So he did reach out and talk with a lot of different people. Now he didn't offer the job to 13 different coaches. He didn't even talk with them about their interest in the job. He just spoke to 13 different coaches who he felt were important to learning about what was the landscape, what was important in today's day and age, what did they think were the key attributes and features that made a great coach. Then he used that information to develop some analytics so that he could prioritize his selection process. I mean, he used all the tools in his toolbox to do this, and he did it basically while hunkering down, in the privacy of his own home with a very small group of people in the know so that he could keep things quiet. And I think I might have even mentioned on this podcast, Alex, that when I'm going to say 3 weeks ago now, there were rumors that he was in town, and there was this stupid photo of basically a middle-aged, slightly overweight guy walking into a grocery store, right? And I'm like, everybody's saying that that's a sighting of Matt Rhule, and that caused all the buzz where there was a whole week, right, where everybody was like, Matt Rhule, right? Then they got convinced that it wasn't happening, and they moved on from him, and they said, well, that ship has sailed at somebody else now, and it became a flavor of the week thing. Well, now I know that it's true. Matt Rhule has acknowledged that he and his wife did come to town. They snuck into town on a football Saturday, so they were here for a home game and to see the atmosphere, to experience it a little bit. Obviously, from a distance, observing from a car or whatever. But they did actually come to Lincoln and evaluate things, and probably took a private tour of the facilities and things like that before they ever made the decision. And I didn't know that. I didn't think that happened, but by golly, it did.
Yeah. Well, I do recall distinctly that when we brought up that rumor that, yeah, he had came and visited the stadium and things like that, you kind of poo-pooed it as like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they, take that risk for Matt Rhule to come in person, to Lincoln,
Right.
And when the Wisconsin game happened, or I guess it was the week before the Wisconsin game, that was when we thought, okay, at this point, it's clear Mickey's not going to salvage the season. This would be the time to perhaps announce a new coach to really dive into the recruiting side of things right before the first signing day deadline. And that would make sense if you had a coach who wasn't currently coaching. You could announce that at this time. And since that didn't happen, we all kind of thought, well, that means it must be a current head coach because Matt Rhule didn't get announced, right?
Right.
But turns out we were all wrong on that speculation.
Exactly. And the way that and how Scott was able to how Trev Albers was able to keep all that quiet, even though he did those things, right? And he had extensive conversations with Matt Rhule. And here's the part that you and I talked a little bit off to the side here about all of the key administrators, Ronnie Green, who is the chancellor, and Ted Carter, who is the president of University of Nebraska, and is also Admiral Ted Carter, who was president or commandant of the Naval Academy for about 11 or 12 years prior to coming to University of Nebraska. And a very impressive individual. Love Ted Carter. And so the real kicker, the real key to getting, because they were, Matt Rhule was absolutely prepared to not take a job this year. His plan was to take a year off, right? At least a year off, and just recharge his batteries, maybe do a little TV and stuff like that, dabble in that, and then, get serious about evaluating job opportunities. And for him to not take that year, because he's getting paid the same no matter what, right? Even now, like he said in his press conference today, I am not here for money, because I would be getting the same amount of money today, whether I was here or I was on a beach. Because the truth is that not only are we going to pay him, but the difference between what we're paying him at a little over $9 million a year and the $10.5 million a year he was scheduled to make with the Carolina Panthers, that difference is going to be made up by the Panthers. So he was going to get his $10.5 million every year, no matter what, right? So he really had to want this job for him to make this decision.
Right. Yeah. And he was very open about that in the press conference. Though I think your numbers are a little bit wrong there, because I saw that his contract is for $74 million for 8 years, but that it's a scaling contract. So I believe in this first year, he's only getting paid $5.5 by the university, but that it scales up over time. And like by 2030, it was going to be like 12 million or something like that.
Oh, okay. Well, that could be. No, I didn't get that sense. Bottom line is over the contract, it's going to average out to about 9.2 million a year, which is just stupid money. But frankly, it's become the going rate. If you look at recent hires within the Big Ten Conference and the SEC Conference, that's what it takes to retain a coach. Is pretty damn close to that, and I think you're going to see a lot of athletic directors having to pony up big time. And interestingly, even and I bet you that Luke Fickle, who became the coach at Wisconsin, his number is around 7.5 million, I think. Well, no, it's more than that, 7.8 million. It's almost 8 million. And had he known what Nebraska's was, his agent's probably kicking himself that
Right.
he didn't get 9, you know?
Yep.
So,
Well, it was interesting that Matt said that literally the first day after he was fired from the Panthers, he got a call about a potential football job. So he's clearly been getting offers from different places throughout these 6 weeks, I think he said it was.
yes.
And this had been quite a long process that, there were contract stipulations and things that need to be worked out with Trev
Right.
behind the scenes and stuff like that. And he was very insistent on the fact that his wife and his family was interested in being here, and she encouraged him that she felt like this was a good place for their family and that it fit
Right.
the culture that he wanted. He talked about how he grew up watching Nebraska beating Penn State, his team, back in the day. So he clearly has some respect for Nebraska, even though he doesn't have any direct ties to the university. He played at Penn State. He never coached in Nebraska or anything like that. But I think the overall impression he gave from the press conference was, my evaluation of it was not anything amazing. It's all just talk at the end of the day. But he didn't say anything wrong. He presented himself professionally. So it was a solid first showing, I would say.
I would absolutely agree. I mean, he is a very articulate guy. He was able to, you can tell that he's a process oriented guy, that he's a message centered guy. And he talked a lot about, everybody being on alignment. And that gets back to Ted Carter. So because Ted was at the military academy, the Naval Academy, and he was at Tulane, I'm sorry, not Tulane, Temple
Right.
University. And so they got to know each other during that time, because the head football coaches, athletic directors, and presidents would get together for meetings within the conference, and the Navy joined that conference that he was in during that time. So that's how the two of them initially met, and of course they were both so impressed with each other that they hit it off. And so that's where Ted was very excited, I think, about the opportunity. And so, of course, when Admiral Carter and Trev Albers walk into your home and spend some time talking about the job with you, it's going to have a positive influence on what you think about the University of Nebraska and how professional and how committed they are to being successful.
Yep. Yeah, and I believe we talked in a previous podcast about how he and Trev have some connections from the past as well. And throughout the whole season, we were discussing how Trev had done a good job of keeping it silent, and that there weren't really any leaks. Now we know that one rumor that we heard a few weeks ago was perhaps the one big early leak. But, even then we weren't sure.
Right. Well, and that's the point. Even though there were a couple of leaks, it never went from one to a corroborating 2 or 3 that would have then the floodgates would have come open, right? And the reality is, had they said that at that time, the truth was it wasn't done, because they had to go through 2 cycles. The first offer was not accepted. I don't know if it wasn't necessarily accepted by Matt so much as there were issues working out all the details with Carolina, right, with the Panthers, and them making sure that the structure of the contract represented a fair market value, which is the language they use to basically say, you can't pay this coach $1 and then make us pay the mail, right? Carry the mail for until the contract is over, and then give him some massive payout at the end, right? There is an element of fairness and market value that has to be met before Carolina would accept the terms. And so there was a lot of complicated back and forth in that before they were able to arrive at it. And I think the one stickling point that Matt probably was hung up on was not his compensation, because effectively he knew what he was going to get paid, at least for the next 4 years, no matter what, right? He was getting it from Carolina. So the actual amount, probably that wasn't the issue. It was more about how much money was he going to have for assistants to have as an assistant pool. And he got a pretty decent chunk. Some people are expressing that they wish it would have been, $1 million more or so. And frankly, if he needed, $500,000 more to get the final piece of his staff puzzle, I have a feeling that he could go back to Trev and ask for it and probably get it, right? Like in a 24-hour period, he could get an affirmative to go ahead and make the offer, right?
Yes,
$7 million's a lot,
right?
I mean, the largest one in the Big Ten is Ohio State's, and they're at like 7.8 million.
Right. Yeah, and I think I saw that like Scott's for his assistant pool was something like 4.7 or something like that. So this is quite
It was around 5, I think. Yeah.
Right. So this is quite a step up for Nebraska.
Is.
And nobody can, accuse Trev of being cheap, right? And not swinging for the fences here. He went after a former NFL coach, successful college coach who multiple programs were going after. We've heard suggestions that Matt Rhule, may have turned down Auburn in favor of Nebraska. This is definitely going to cost the university money, especially if he doesn't work out, right? 8-year contract for $74 million is a heavy chunk of change. But the goal and the hope, of course, is that it's going to be worth it and that he's going to actually be the one to finally turn the program around like he's done at Temple, like he did at Baylor.
Exactly. And the bottom line is, this guy's a grinder. So as long as he doesn't have a health event or something like that prohibits him from, doing his job, he's a guy that's going to work his tail off. It sounds like, and it looks like, and we're going to get into this in a little bit, it looks like he's going for a little bit of a youth movement with his staff. He is prioritizing energy and I think, connection, right? Your ability to communicate and connect with the young athletes of today, and guys who are going to be raring to go to dive in and work those 16-hour days and just devote themselves to making this a reality.
Right. Looking at his history, he's 47 years old. Like I mentioned, he played at Penn State, so he hasn't really coached in the Big Ten, but he did play in the Big Ten back in the day. And he started off in a variety of different positions like defensive lines coach, linebackers, special teams, things like that. And then eventually moved into more of a quarterbacks, offensive coordinator, before he got his head coaching jobs. So I think, what he was known for when he got hired at, Temple or at the New York Giants as an assistant offensive line coach, was more on the offensive side of the ball. So I think that's probably more where he leans, but he has history coaching defense as well. So I think he's got
he played linebacker. So I would disagree with you, Alex. Actually, I think if you revisit that, you're going to see that he spent a lot of time coaching defense too, and he's a linebacker. That's what he played.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think the general point is correct. He has time spent as a coach on both sides of the ball, and has been quite impressive, frankly. In terms of all the different things that he's done, and then got brought back to Temple after being an assistant there. Then went to the NFL and then got asked to come back to be the head coach.
Right. Yes. And at Temple, back in 2013, he started off with a 2-10 record, improved that to a 6-6 record, then 10-4 the following year, 10-3 the next year. Right. And it followed a similar trend at Baylor, which he took over right after there were massive sexual scandals there, and they were under probation and things of that nature. So he started off rough, 1-11, improved that to 7-6, improved that to 11-3, and that's where he was then hired to go coach for the Panthers in the NFL. So my message to Nebraska fans would be that we need to have patience, as always, right? I don't think he's going to miraculously turn things around in a year. But his record would show that by year 3, when he's got his guys in place, he's been able to get recruiting going the way he wants and implement his systems and everything. That's the year that hopefully we'll have our real turnaround moment.
Right. Well, and he has said that even one of the things he learned in his NFL stint there at the Carolina Panthers is, you know what? The bottom line is you got to win, and you got to win now. Okay. So he recognizes that the reason he didn't get more time at Carolina because he didn't win enough. And so I think that he recognizes that in this new age of transfer portal and NIL opportunities, and knowing that Nebraska has a good structure on those things, that he has the opportunity to shore up this team once he completes his assessment of it and figure out what the needs are and go out and fill those needs, certainly through recruiting. But given that you're really coming in late in the game from the recruiting for this 2023 year, but also looking at what's going on with the portal, because I have a feeling the portal is going to be explosively big this year. And because you still have people with COVID years available. And I just have a feeling he is going to recognize and try to take advantage of the opportunity to enhance the team more rapidly by getting some transfers in here, and then hopefully do the best he can at retaining the guys that are important to retain. And if he can get that accomplished, that he's not going to be happy with a 1-11 season next year, for example. I think he wants to go bowling.
Right.
Now, he didn't say that's what we're going to do. He says we're just going to work every day, and we're just going to get better every day. And it's a process, and we're just going to work. But I think he also recognizes that the fan base and even he himself wants this to happen faster.
Right. Well, as you say, we are in a different era. He even mentioned that, since I stopped coaching in the college in 2019, and just in those few years, things have changed so much with the transfer portals and NIL and all those new rules, right? So he has to adjust to that environment. But like you say, those open up opportunities, like we had with Casey Thompson, and some other people transferring in this year, to get some real difference makers on the team, and hopefully, turn things around faster. Also, we're not dealing with a massive scandal like Baylor was, and we have way more resources than a Temple does, so you would hope that, we'd be able to, get some better results there. Though he will also be coming in right around the time that the Big Ten is transitioning to having USC and UCLA in the Big Ten and the shakeup of the divisions, however that will be. So we may be playing tougher schedules than we have been in recent years.
Absolutely. And that's why next year is so critically important, right? Because frankly, he needs to show some progress from where we've been next year. Because if you look at our schedule, I could easily see a 1-11. There's no doubt. But with improvement over what and more consistency, and not beating yourself, and some of the key themes, playing with a tougher mentality, and just being more physical, we beat Wisconsin if we have that. We beat Minnesota if we have that. We likely beat Purdue if we have that. We certainly beat Georgia Southern, and I'm trying to think. There's one other, Northwestern. So you start doing the math on this past year, and you begin to realize, gee, we were close in a lot of those games, and if we had some of these attributes that are being espoused almost in every sentence by Matt Rhule, if we can begin to see the success of that. We have a schedule next year that would allow us to get to 6 wins, maybe even more.
Right.
But then the following year, not so much.
Right.
The following year, but that schedule might be completely blown up, and everything's recalculated because that's the year that USC and UCLA come in.
Right.
So all the schedules are going to get blown up.
Yep. During his press conference, he mentioned, the importance of the line of scrimmage, how he wants to run a balanced offense of running and passing, and that winning at the line of scrimmage and being able to play in any kind of weather, hot at the beginning of the year, cold at the end of the year, that's what he is looking for, which is, of course, is music to Nebraska fans' ears. But I find it interesting. The rumor currently is that he's targeting South Carolina's current offensive coordinator, Marcus Satterfield, who worked with him at pretty much all of his previous jobs. So he has an obvious connection with Matt Rhule. But when I was reading the thread about that, South Carolina, they've gotten some more attention because they've had 2 big upsets here recently, Tennessee and then Clemson. But earlier in the year, they were really struggling. They weren't doing so hot as a team. And apparently his kind of style is more of a pro football style. He's a real X's and O's guys and likes to come up with complicated passing routes and things like that. And the tone I was getting from the South Carolina fans is that in these last 2 games, they kind of simplified things and said, F it, and they've had some more success. So I'm curious to see if this guy's, that kind of really pass-focused philosophy is what this guy is going to bring to Nebraska, or is he going to accommodate his systems to match, a more run-focused thing, that like Matt was talking about in today's press conference.
Right. And I think there's going to be a merging of that, right? Because when he was at Baylor, he used a lot of RPO and he had some reasonably athletic quarterbacks, right? So and if you look at South Carolina, that was the destination of Spencer Rattler, who was the Oklahoma quarterback from last year, not this year, who started the season as a potential Heisman Trophy candidate, but then after 2 shoddy performances was benched and replaced by Caleb Williams, right? This is before Lincoln Riley went over to USC. So, and then he immediately went in the transfer portal and transferred to South Carolina and saved a year of eligibility. And then he's played there at South Carolina, and he had a up and down year this year at South Carolina, but he was the one pulling the trigger, so to speak, on this guy's offense. So, obviously a guy with some wheels, with some athleticism is the kind of guy that they want based on that offensive system. So there's more running there than you might think. And it depends on what, again, the thing I like about Rhule was his responses were all based on, we're going to do what we do well.
Right.
So if our team and our capabilities are that, running the football is what we do better than passing it, then we're going to run the football more. If we can't run it very well, we're going to pass it more. And from year to year, that's going to vary depending on the status of our personnel. Right. And I felt like for a number of years, we have not had a coach that had that philosophy. We have had coaches that were very, very much married to their system, to their scheme. And they had a hard time giving that up. And Matt Rhule is not a coordinator. He's not an offensive coordinator. He's not a defensive coordinator. He is a head coach, and that's what he does. And so I think there's just going to be a lot more collaboration and a lot more flexibility in what that stuff looks like.
Yeah. I hope that that's true. And you're right. He did mention that stuff about, we'll do what the players do well.
Right.
Just some of the stuff I was reading about this Marcus guy, gave me flashbacks to, Scott Frost and some of his complex offensive things, right, that he was trying to do. especially at the college level, right? It's different at the pro level. So I hope that there we do see that flexibility, like you're talking about.
Yep.
Some other names we've heard about assistants, no one's confirmed yet. This is still early days. But Corey Campbell for strength and conditioning, Evan Cooper as a recruiting coordinator and defensive backs coach, Terrence Knighton for defensive line, and potentially Ed Foley as a special teams coach.
Right. And if you read, I mean, like Satterfield, the coordinator we were just talking about, he was initially hired by Rhule at Baylor, not necessarily to be the OC, but to be the recruiting coordinator and quarterbacks coach, for example. So, I mean, we have a number of guys that have in their past been critically involved in recruiting, and that's a good sign. And they all seem to be really high energy and relatively young. So I'm liking the makeup of this staff so far from an age and and that recruiting seems to be a key element of a number of these hires. We'll see how many ultimately come, and when it's all said and done, what it looks like. But it looks like he's going for a somewhat young group, and one that's going to be super high energy, that are articulate, and so they can work well in the moms and dads living rooms, in the recruiting trail, and hopefully are great communicators to instruct and teach these young men how to be better football players and better human
Right.
beings.
Well, and speaking about Rhule's age as well, right? With Mike Riley, we went with someone who was near the end of their coaching career, had a lot of experience. Then we went with Scott, who was this younger, up and coming coach with not as much head coaching experience. So now I think it's kind of nice we've settled on a more middle aged guy like Matt, who's has a lot of experience, but still could easily coach for 15 years, at Nebraska if things go well, right? So from that perspective, I think it's good. And to bring some youth into his assistant pool, right, to bring that level of energy, since he is more of a middle-aged guy himself. I think that's good. You sent me a picture of this Corey Campbell guy, the strength and conditioning coach.
Yeah.
He's built like a brick shit house, He certainly lives up
Yeah.
to his
Well,
coaching
and
responsibility.
right, and it's going to be very interesting. He's a younger guy, but he's been with Matt Rhule quite a while, and he and he's been around. So hopefully he's smart, right? Because if he has, taken in and learned, he has been around NFL strength and conditioning programs. He's been around collegiate ones, in various stops, with Matt, as well as away from Matt. So he's got quite a variety of experience. He's not got the recognitions. Duval had been identified as strength and conditioning coordinator of the year that UCF went to the Sugar Bowl, and and then he came with Scott to Lincoln, but it never translated, right? Like whatever the philosophies were, they tended to get our guys too big and slow. We lost fast twitch and flexibility, and it didn't translate to function and performance on the field. I'm hopeful that this guy is going to have more of that.
Right. Yep. I totally agree. And as one final thing about his coaching record, we should, of course, bring up that he did not have so much success in the NFL at the Carolina Panthers. Went 5-11, 5-12, then was fired after going 1-4 in the 2022 season. However, I'm not going to dwell on that too much because there are numerous examples, including Nick Saban, of great college coaches that have gone to the NFL, failed, and then come back to college and done well. So I take from that Rhule's kind of philosophy is better suited to this younger kind of group of people, and that kind of energy that you get in college football versus the pro game.
Well, and I think there's a couple of things that worked against him uh, in uh, um, in his pro experience there at Carolina. One was that the quarterback that he planned the ride with got injured, and and he had a devastating series of injuries. They had one of the best running backs in the country. Actually, it was Luke McCaffrey, our quarterback
Right.
from the Scott Frost era. It was his brother Christian, who was a superstar All-American at Stanford, and then became one of the best running backs in the NFL. And then he got injured, and so you lost your superstar running back, you lost your quarterback. They had some other injuries too, and it just got ugly, right? And so and the NFL is such a quarterback-driven league. If you don't have a good quarterback, you really don't have much of a chance. And let me restate that. If you don't have a great quarterback, you don't have a chance. And that's why, the best teams in the league are the ones that have quarterbacks who are performing at a high level, at a really high level.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the ones that win championships. And everyone else ends up being around 500. Well, he probably, or his team, might very well be in that direction this year. The team that he put together. So it'll be interesting to see how Carolina does the remainder of this year with the guy who took his place, one of his staff members who took his place.
Mm-hmm.
Because if he had won just a few more games, he might very well have been given a little bit more leash, a little more time. But they just couldn't see the path. And they wanted to dump him, I think, when he was still close enough to his successful collegiate time frame that he would still be attractive to lots of colleges, so that then they would know that someone like Nebraska would come along and pay the majority of his contract. And that's exactly what happened. So that probably motivated them to fire him the way they did. So I don't know that he was necessarily as big a failure as people think in the NFL. And there was one other thing that he did mention, which is, he was in the NFL during COVID, and that really limited his ability to build relationships, because he couldn't have the one-on-one face-to-face time that he wanted to have and that he normally has with his players. And that hurt him.
Yeah. Obviously, it's an awkward time for anybody to be stepping into a new coaching position at that time. The other coach that we've discussed potentially staying is Bill Busch, who obviously started as our special teams coordinator, moved into the role of defensive coordinator, and the defense saw significant improvements after he took over that role. And we praised his ability to help us close out that Iowa game when the offense was stuttering. However, I can't see Matt Rhule giving up a position as prominent, as important as defensive coordinator to somebody that he doesn't really have a relationship with. So my expectation would be that if Bill Busch were to stay, it would be in some more minor defensive assistant role, or as special teams coordinator, because that's what he started as, and he's clearly very good at that. However, we are hearing rumors about this Ed Foley guy who Matt has worked with before as a special teams coach, potentially coming to Nebraska.
But I also hope, and have gotten some indications, that Bill Busch really likes being back in Nebraska, and in fact would be willing maybe even to fall back to the role he had 2 years ago and be a defensive analyst, not even an assistant coach, but still be involved with the program and be kind of right there in case they need something, and do that for a year and stay in Lincoln, because he's still going to be paid as an assistant coach because of the contract he has. So he could afford to do that, stick around, be an analyst for a year. And then after a year, maybe there is a change in the staff that Rhule has, because somebody wants to leave, they get an opportunity, whatever, a job comes open. And then at that point, after having an experience, a year of working with Bill Busch and seeing how valuable he is and how much knowledge he brings and all that, then maybe Matt Rhule's far more inclined to say, hey, I want you on my staff. You know what I mean? So strategically for Bill, I think the idea of laying low for a year, if he had to, and just being an analyst, but yet he's still going to be paid the assistant coaching salary he had this year because of the contract that he had, right?
Right.
I think all of those assistants that at Nebraska got a 3-year contract. That's how they kept them under a lame duck Scott Frost. So those guys are all going to get paid for another 2 years.
Right. Yeah, no, I could see that happening. Yeah, he was a special teams assistant, right, previously, and that was one of the reasons why Scott promoted him to special teams coordinator, because we really needed help on special teams, and he,
Right.
We weren't like amazing on special teams, but we were significantly improved compared to the year before, in terms of not making critical mistakes and things like that. So I would be happy to see Bill Busch stick around as well. Of course, he's a more proven entity, right, than these new guys that Matt Rhule are bringing in, that I don't know as well. But we'll see on that one. Last thing we'll talk about here is some of the shakeups in the national side of things, because there were other prominent programs obviously looking for their own coaches. One big one that affects us directly is Wisconsin. Luke Fickell, who the current coach of Cincinnati, was announced to be stepping in as the coach for Wisconsin, which was a bit of a surprise to me because they had promoted Jim Leonard, their defensive coordinator, to be head coach early in the year, seemingly firing Paul Chryst a bit abruptly, to hold on to him because he was coming up in conversations about the Nebraska job and some of the other jobs that were coming open. So I think you and I's thought process at the time was that, okay, they're going to try this guy out, and hopefully just make him the head coach, because everyone seems to really think he's got it going. Though in terms of his record since he took over, he ended up 4-3 with the recent upset loss to Minnesota to end off their regular season. So, as you mentioned on the previous podcast, the athletic department at Wisconsin was obviously doing a coaching search and had to have been talking to Luke Fickell for, a while now. This isn't just, oh, Jim Leonard lost this last game, we got to hire somebody else. But I am curious, if more details will come out about what the athletic director's thought process was there.
Right. I have a feeling that initially his thought process was if Jim was able to, basically take the reins here and turn this thing around and really get the team playing, Badger football, so to speak, low error, hard disciplined running, power football, and then great defense. I think if he had been able to accomplish that, then it would have been much harder for the athletic director to choose Luke Fickell. But after you watch the press conference for the introduction, the fact is that those two guys go back. They played against each other in college, right? The athletic director at Wisconsin played at Wisconsin, and Luke was a defensive lineman for Ohio State. So they played across each other, literally. They were competing against each other on the field. So and they did that for a couple of years together. So they knew each other because of that, those interactions, those relationships, right? And then he had just followed Luke's career. So this was a guy that he had on his mind. He may have never intended to give the job permanently to Jim Leonard. It might be that he was always thinking Fickell, but he just let everybody think it was him so he could do his search very quietly. And it worked because it was a surprise nationally. Everybody was shocked when it happened because they had successfully made everybody believe Jim Leonard was going to be the guy. Now the challenge is, does Jim Leonard stay on staff or does he leave? Because Keep in mind, he was he and still is a very hot commodity. His performance as defensive coordinator at Wisconsin has been one of the top, defensive coordinator performances in college football. He was offered the opportunity to be the defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers in his home state. That would be a dream job for a kid who grew up, went to Wisconsin, played as a walk-on, became an all Big Ten performer. He is Mr. Wisconsin, but you know darn well he was also a Packers fan. So when the Green Bay Packers of the NFL come calling and saying, "Hey, we want you to be our defensive coordinator," he turned it down because he believed he was in line to be the next Wisconsin head coach.
Right.
So I think he is greatly disappointed by this. And it'll be interesting to see over the next few days, much like the Mickey situation that we have. It will be interesting to see if Jim Leonhard is able to come to terms with that, accept his situation, and then go back to being defensive coordinator at Wisconsin. And the other question would be, um, Coach Fickle has an outstanding defensive coordinator that has been with him at Cincinnati for a number of years, and he is the son of the guy who gave him his start. Jim Tressel, was the head coach at Ohio State for many years. A very good coach who won national championship there, and his son is Luke Fickle's defensive coordinator.
Right.
And has been very good.
Mm-hmm.
Do you take your guy, or do you concede that guy so that you can ask Jim Leonhard to be your coordinator?
Right. Well, and once again, to your point about, dozens of coaching opportunities probably to open up here soon. I think Jim Leonhard had more success than Mickey, obviously, right? 4-3 versus 3-6, and had more prominence before he was promoted to head coach than Mickey did. This was a bit more of a surprise, I think, for the general public and probably for Jim Leonhard himself. And if he could get a defensive coaching job at the Packers, say, because he won't be the Wisconsin head coach anymore, or a head coaching job at a, middle level school, he may very well go for that and not be able to kind of take that humble pie, as it were, to stay at Wisconsin.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, as I think that would probably be the best move for him in his career, because now Luke Fickle, though, here's the rebuttal to that. Luke Fickle's background, his history. So he was coaching at Ohio State, his alma mater, for Jim Tressel. Jim Tressel got in trouble, got sideways with the NCAA, and got suspended. And Luke Fickle became the interim head coach. He was the defensive coordinator. He became the interim head coach of Ohio State. Okay. They had a very poor year during his tenure, as most interim coaches have. And but they then hired Urban Meyer at the end of that season as the new head coach at Ohio State. And Urban asked him to stay on, and he stayed on. He was the defensive coordinator for the first year of Urban Meyer's time at Ohio State, and then he got the head coaching job at Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
So it worked out really well for him to stick around for a year and take the humble pie after being the head coach and step back down to being just the defensive coordinator, learn under another legendary coach. And then when the next opportunity came for a head coaching job, he took it.
Right. Yeah. No, there's some truth to that. So he could preach that story to Jim and say, hey, this worked out for me in the past.
Yeah. And really, I think the real key in that is whether or not his existing defensive coordinator at Cincinnati was interested in joining him in Wisconsin or not. Because if that guy wanted to stay in Cincinnati, or maybe was offered the head coaching job at Cincinnati, I don't know if he will or not. Anyway, my point is there's some things there, some merry-go-round stuff that could happen for those guys. So all will fall and chips will fall, and we'll see how they all play out. And like for me, I mean, it's exciting to see, who we're getting or whatever, but there's all this emotional energy spent saying, oh, we should have gotten this guy. And the problem is the average fan has no idea how much genuine interest a particular coach might have in being a part of a staff, regardless of whether they've had ties to that coach previously or not. You don't know how happy or confident they are in the longevity of the job that they currently have. There's all those kinds of things, right? And just somebody who, has got a good situation down in the South and likes where their family's living, they're not going to move to Grand or to Lincoln, Nebraska, right? So There's all kinds of factors that play into who actually says yes and who doesn't. But as long as they have a philosophy that matches with what Matt Rhule believes is important, and so they have a shared vision of how we're going to get this done, and Matt believes they're communicators. Clearly, Matt's a communicator. I think he knows and knows how to identify coaches who are going to be equally adept at communicating. So my hope would be that would work. But we're just gonna have to wait and see.
Yeah. Well, I think this gets to the last topic, which will just be evaluating the Matt Rhule hire. I mentioned on a previous podcast when those rumors about Matt, being in Lincoln emerged, I looked into him more and saw the fact that, he started off rough at both Baylor and Temple, but really turned them around into successful programs and everything. That made me think, oh yeah, no, I think this guy, has the past track record that we'd be looking for. So I'm pretty happy with him, being our coach. He was near the top of my list of possibilities, like we've mentioned, an Urban Meyer, despite his, personal issues, would be great from a coaching perspective, but the likelihood of him ever coming to Nebraska, of all things, was pretty low. Obviously, your number one guy was always Dave Aranda at Baylor, who's had some struggles this year. But how do you compare a potential Aranda hire to what we currently have with Matt Rhule?
I would say that now, like you, knowing Matt Rhule's history, okay, and having had an opportunity to listen to him speak and to espouse his philosophy, I really really like the Matt Rhule hire. He is my kind of coach. I think he is a Midwestern, hard driving, intense coach, much like I like and want and had when I was playing the sport. So I have great affinity for all of that, and yet he's a good Christian man. It would appear, and so he's grounded in that. He's got some humility to him. I think the fact that he just is coming off of effectively a failure at the NFL level has provided the kind of humility that he needs to work even harder to double up on his efforts and to do so smartly, right? That he's going to have learned from that experience. So I love the hire. I would say that if I had known all the details of Matt Rhule, as much as I was aware of Dave Aranda's history, I probably would say that I would view them as equally desirable. And Dave was always my top guy because I knew his history and I was so impressed by his defensive prowess at both Wisconsin and LSU. Now I look at Matt Rhule and I realize he's got more of a history, and it's as a head coach. And there's a big difference between being a coordinator and a head coach.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, not to mention that Aranda's the guy who took over after he left Baylor, so there's a connection there.
Absolutely. And Aranda's early success, the championship last year, in large part was achieved with Matt Rhule's players.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a huge tip of the cap for the success of that program that has to be given to Matt Rhule for last year's Big 12 championship team.
All right. Yep. Well, this will be the third of these coaching rodeos we've gone through while doing this podcast. We were here for the Mike Riley switch and the Scott Frost switch. So we're hoping that this one is finally the one that clicks, and I think Trev accurately assessed that the timetable of fans' patience, in terms of waiting for the program to turn around, is running out. So that, they needed to spend the big bucks to get the guy they really want and go for broke, and either this is going to work and be a big success or it's not. And the university is going to lose a lot of money and, we'll be in a pretty rough spot.
Well, no, we'll take a swing again. Actually, in one of the future.
Well, but let me finish what I was saying though, because my opinion is like if Matt Rhule goes as bad as Scott Frost did, right, where we're winning 4 3 to 4 games a season. I fully expect the sellout streak will die in that period, in terms of selling out the stadium, and fans will really be like, well, we spent all this money. We got the big name coach and he failed again. And we've now had more than a decade since the Bo Pelina era where we were at least decent, and we've been crap since then. And even in the Bo Pelina era, we weren't satisfied with what we were getting. So we're just be getting further and further removed from the greatness of the Osborne era. So I think that's significant.
Oh, I totally agree. The window of our ability to kind of pull out of this dive that we've been in for 20 years is very, very short. And with the changing dynamics of collegiate athletics, a lot of these changes, frankly, do not lend themselves to low population areas. And so it's going to make the climb out harder with every passing year that we don't start making the improvements. We still have this small window of opportunity in which, because of our good stewardship of our athletic department that has happened in the past, and because of our commitment from our fan base, we find ourselves in an unusually good position financially. Even among Big Ten teams, we're in great shape, way better than most. And that's on the heels of already spending $165 million for what will be the best, development center in the country when it opens here in a few months. The top of the line. And that's Trev's focus. That's his commitment. His commitment is we are going to develop our athletes better than anybody else. We are going to be the place that players and athletes come to be developed. And I love that goal. It's a goal to get us to a place where we used to be, because we were the ones who were the first ones to do an awful lot of things that are now standard practice across a lot of sports. And so I love Trev Alber's leadership. So as long as we can have him and Admiral Carter and Matt Rhule now, I think we have what it takes to get that ball rolling in the right direction. Are we going to be winning championships anytime soon? I don't know that. There's so many things that have to happen for that to happen.
Right. But to at least, I'd say currently the goal is to be able to consistently go to a bowl game and to be in the hunt for the division championship, to be able to be good,
right,
to be going to the bowl game, or to the championship game, right? Even if we don't always get there, right? As long as we're in the hunt, and we're just a game or two short of it or whatever, that's where we want to be currently to call that a good step forward.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I agree.
All right.
It's an exciting day though. I was so impressed by today's presentation, and I am excited about the future.
All right. Well, that's good to hear. So we'll be talking more about Matt Rhule and what the coaching situation ends up being with the assistant coaches and all that stuff here in the future. And as well as obviously the national side of things with the conference championship games and the playoff coming up. So there's a lot to look forward to in this last month of the year as we end off the football season in style.
That's right. All right. Well, enjoy this weekend's conference championship weekend, and we'll talk football with you again early next week.
That's right. If you out there enjoy listening to the podcast, you can reach out to us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also search for us, College Football Throwdown, on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can leave us a rating or review there. We always love hearing from the fans. And this one's for Matt Rhule. Go Big Red.
Go Big Red.